We go. Hello, everybody. Happy Monday, because that's what it is for me. It's been a day of serving people and love doing it. So it's always a good day for me. I want to welcome you to our Wellness Chronicles. And as you know, I'm Aaron. Hopefully, you know that. And if you don't now, you do. And Wellness Chronicles is this time on Monday evenings when we get together as community and we have the conversations. And the conversations are those that explore injustice and how to ignite sustainable change and embed wellness. Key, how to embed wellness in marginalized communities. For those who've hung with me for a while, we've been hanging out since the first Monday in June. Our response to the execution of George Floyd, we wanted to be able to have conversations about our community. So when I talk about marginalized communities, I'm talking about the Black community. And I'm talking about those communities within the Black community. All right. We are a family of families. We are a community of communities. And so we utilize this space to have those conversations. So welcome. Thank you. Join in. Please come in on chat. If you're watching, join the conversation. Make sure you're sharing this. Make sure you're getting this out to your social network friends and family so that they can also participate in the conversation. Every week, I say we have this dynamic panel, right? We have this special panel, and today is really no different, but I really mean it. I'm gonna tell you how much I mean it. We have a panel of one tonight. And so tonight we're talking about and continuing our conversations about reentry in the Black community and what that looks like as far as how the Black community allows, navigates, helps support the reentry of our men and women, our brothers and sisters, our fathers and mothers, our daughters and sons, our nieces and nephews who are coming back from their incarceration experience. How do we help them get back into their flow of society so they can have their part, their rightful place of wellness and healing in our communities? And so my special guest, our special guest tonight is the Queen, Isis Bey. And Isis is the owner and lead technician at Harmony Health Therapeutic Services, which she'll be telling us about. And we want to make sure that we are very attentive and participating tonight as we're hanging out. Isis, welcome to Wellness Chronicles. Thank you so much for coming on. If you would, before we get into conversation about reentry, could you tell the folks a little bit about Isis, who you are, what's going on in Isis universe?
That is that's a whole nother our network. Thank you for having me on. I first want to thank my brother Kelly Little. I want to shout you out live in public and direct today because I learned that I thought I was coming on a panel. And I found out that I am the panel, and it was all to you, beloveds. I'm going to thank you personally, too, as well. Thank you so much.
Isis, throw some of that out there to Kristen Brown, too. You throw some of that out there.
Oh, Kristen, you, my sister. I love you. And my brother, Mr. Brown, Wes, I love y'all. And I'm going to have that. Thank you personally as well. I love y'all. So, yes, I came on. I was like, where is the rest of the people coming on today? Where's everyone else at? He was like, oh, about that. So thank you again for having me. I am the owner and founder of Harmony Health. And all those long letters behind my name just says that I do a lot of work in the community. I am a licensed clinical social worker with the state of North Carolina. I am a supervisor, a clinical supervisor, in which I supervise other newer clinicians. I'm an adjunct professor at multiple universities here in North Carolina, and Winthrop's in South Carolina. Johnson C. Smith, shout out. The rest of those long letters pretty much says I'm an advanced level certified nationally certified trauma professional, which means I've done extensive training in work and supervision in the trauma world. And our agency is actually a trauma-focused agency, which means all of our practices and models are evidence-based and based on trauma-informed models. But I would like to add that we are also what we call a healing-centered model. So we're not just trauma-informed healing center. We start with resiliency. It's a resiliency framework in which we start with this person first, person centered, and how did they get here? We start with all of their strengths. How did they survive? How did you already do this? And then we bring them, adding on to their skills. And the philosophy of Harmony Health is a little different than other agencies. We say we're African centered, which means we're a collective. We use the village framework in which we build a family, and we talk about building family, disrupting oppression, disrupting individualistic culture, which harms everybody, not just people of African descent, because you get in this individual cipher and there's this bubble in which you don't have resources and supports. And to build resiliency, you have to have a safety net and a support resource and a support network. So we do operate from that. And the way we operate is we believe that the client and the families are the experts, where we're the guides and the tools and the mentors, if you say, the coaches, giving them feedback on that healing process. So let me shout out Miss Kiki. How are you, girl? I love you. I miss you. I've tried to reach out to you. Looks like she's shouting us out.
That's my people.
My peoples. I ain't see Kiki in a minute. I miss you. And so Harmony Health does operate from that whole philosophy of the client being an expert. We operate not out of cultural competence, but cultural humility, because competence is also a term of oppression, which it implies that we can ever be competent in somebody's culture. And that is not the case. That is never the case. You can never be competent in another person's culture. So we operate out of cultural humility, where we're constantly as a student and learning someone's culture, teaching us about it. Our staff are always trained in, I'm an implicit bias and an anti-racism trainer. That's a lot of my history. I miss you too. And so we operate out of that. Kiki did my implicit bias workshop. Kika. So we do that. We do a lot of training with implicit bias, a lot of work on digging into those biases with us and talking about anti-racism and disrupting oppression with our agency. Personally, my background, I have been an educator at a charter school. I have been here in North Carolina as both a counselor and a reentry specialist and gang specialist. I was a project coordinator over 3 counties for the state Department of Juvenile Justice, overseeing the gang prevention dollars we got back in the late 2000s. We ended about 2012. So I did a lot of that work, overseeing, monitoring, auditing, those types of work in agencies around reentry with the juvenile population. After that, I did work at DSS sometime. I worked very closely with Chief Monroe in the disproportionate minority contact work and partnering with the now Race Matters for Juvenile Justice. I did a lot of that training with them back then during those times. And then after DSS here, did a lot of work there. I opened up my practice and doing brought all of those skills, the education, and into the treatment model that we have today.
Thank you so very much. And so when we talk about you being panel tonight, that's the reason why, right? And so you set yourself up for that. And so thank you so very much.
I just learned that, Aaron. Hey. I just told you about that.
We're so grateful. Seriously, Isis, we are so grateful for your time. My question real quickly, which has just to enter us into conversation. After we saw all of the protests, we saw all of the movement this past summer. Was you a part of any of the implicit bias training? I had a series on where I brought in the judges, and several of them talked about being able to shift, and they started doing some workshops with implicit bias. Were you a part of any of that training?
Not theirs. They did. I did get some requests in for the county initially through their training department to come and do that. They wanted mine mandatory because they kind of, what I've understood, and someone else can correct me, they did more of a like a general, and they wanted me to come do the inner work, the more deeper level, but there were some scheduling conflicts, and then kind of some of the other stuff happened. So I do know that they were out there, and Derek Anderson, the director, was doing a lot of those trainings and partnering with the other Race Matters for Juveniles. So I can't say what that was. I wasn't specifically with that, but I was part in the community on the grounds where a lot of schools, a lot of agencies, corporations, we were doing it. I'm a faculty at Charlotte AHEC doing implicit bias. So we were kind of doing it in that room.
So my next question with that, and forgive me because it's taking us a little bit to the left, but now that I've got you here, the conversation is so interesting to me on this. Have you seen and have you noticed? I'm always concerned that as a people, we're moved by events, and so once the event has lessened its notoriety, the media attention is gone, or the media for whoever shifts our attention, we take our foot off the pedal. And so have you noticed in the need to have Harmony Health come in so much in the May, June, July? Did you see it?
Oh man,
taper off, especially
I have been doing this training, Aaron, since 2013. Mm-hmm. It's here and there. Some people book it, cancel it, right? What's so interesting is right after I was getting calls for weekly agency 3 and 4, come down here. We need it. We need it. And I was like, we've always needed it. What was more interesting dynamic for me is throughout the years that I've been doing this, I've had less than a total outside of the agencies. Like when I'm doing it through Harmony Health or through when it's just out there, if it's not an agency based, inside individually my workshops, I've had less than 10 Blacks altogether.
Wow.
I just had my first 2 men probably last December, like July, December. And I've only had people who are in the mental health profession. Nope, I'm sorry. I had 1 school personnel. When I've done them and promoted it with like in the community, I've not had a lot of community people. A lot of people say, and then they don't do it. But, you know, I get it. But mostly mental health professionals, not school teachers, not doctors, not law enforcement. I promoted to all, not law enforcement, not to academic staff. It's mostly social workers, counselors, or psychologists coming through. And again, mostly white women. I'm trying to think. I may have had 1 white man throughout all the years that I've been doing.
And that your answer lines up to my observations, right? Just from the total picture of where we were and found ourselves, especially the response to George Floyd's execution. This worldwide momentum happened, and our norm kicked in. We've let our foot off the pedal, right? And so I use Wellness Chronicles for that purpose, to make sure the conversations continue and that solutions are found and that we can find a way to keep our foot on the pedal. So thank you for that. Let's dig into reentry, Isis. Let's look at reentry. We know that the statistics tell us that about 78%, around that number, of people who go into incarceration come back into the communities they are incarcerated from, right? The communities that their criminal cases come from, they come back to these communities. And so that means that we are looking at the addition of, we're looking at this, first of all, we're looking at the subtraction from for however long that is, and then the addition back to. And so our men and women come back, and they come back different men and women, regardless of how small or large. We're looking at the degree of change. The reality of it is change has happened. In many of our cases, change has happened in the community, but in some cases, our people are coming back to communities that it was like a time stood still, coming back to communities that are just like the ones they left. And so I wanted to start with this part of the conversation. For me, the Black community is such a wealth. It's a source. It's a value. I don't believe that we should operate from deficit, which we're taught to, but we should operate from strength. If you want it, we have it in there, the talent, the gifts. So with that said, the role, since that percentage of people come from our community to incarceration, they come back to our community. That means there is a role that the community must play. So what is the Black community's role and responsibility for reentry for our residents, for our fathers and daughters and brothers and sisters?
Well, one, I believe, is education and understanding how they got there in the first place. Because we're often our challenge is that we're reactionary, and we don't do enough prevention. And truly, resources happen on the front end, and we don't do enough prevention, period. Whether it's our community, the system, the community at large, this nation, our society, we don't focus a lot of funding into prevention. We focus a lot of funding into the intervention and the after fact, right? And the post type of thing. So honestly, if our community started with just education on the prevention, right? We knowing that there is a disproportionate minority contact. Most are not even aware that that was a law back in the 70s. In the 70s, this law was put in as a federal law that mandated that states had to find ways to reduce the number of Black and Latinos that's entering our system. Okay, that's number one. And the fact that it wasn't enacted until later, they had funding way back in 98 and then 2004 for research, and then further down the line to actually enforce it. So if we just had information on some of these laws that's been there, perhaps we would be a little more proactive in enforcing it and demanding these things from the system. Because like when George Floyd, like again, the fire hit the wall, shit, everything hit. And now we're like demanding this. We wanted the streets painted. So, we didn't demand that the budget. So it's like, and now we're painting the streets. We're like, see, we won. And we're taking pictures in the streets versus, well, hold on, these funding, this still looks the same. In order to change the system, what we're also not understanding and learning is that a system is designed to reinforce itself. So we keep hearing the system's broken. This is not broken. The system is working exactly how it was designed to work. Absolutely. Intentionally or not. These systems in every institution was set up in the 1600s to benefit one dominant culture. It's just what it is at that time. It wasn't as personal at that time until they had to justify why they had free labor and why they were taking people, right? But those institutions are still the same. They have not been dismantled and rebuilt. And we don't demand that. We really operate out of sensationalism, that emotion, like the feel good. And so we don't operate in numbers, because when we're talking about an oppressive system with power, there's 3 ways to get power, right? We know it has to do with money and power, but for change. The other one is numbers. And so the prevention piece, having that information to understand that if we collectively looked at these things ahead of time, what do we know? We know that it is cheaper to provide community-based services for these families, these youth, these adults, these mothers, sisters, right? We know that it's way cheaper to sustain them with community services. We know that. We know that once they hit the system, any of them, they are more at risk for recidivism, right? They are most likely to come back in, because the further they penetrate this system, the deeper level they get connected with others, whoever, and they become institutionalized. So the furthest away from that system we can keep them and maintain in the community, we save money. We save hundreds of thousands. And then we know the ratios, that if you are doing the same thing that this counterpart, the white counterpart, is doing, you're 3 times more likely to get more time, more everything. So when we have these educations, then we can talk to the community about, okay, what are we doing with jobs? What are we doing with some of these things and these nonprofits and these organizations where these young people, we know that they're trying to find money. What apprenticeships are we doing ahead of time? And then when we do them, they're very exclusive and they're very quiet. You have to be inside certain alliances and certain ways to be able to access these trainings for the 14-year-olds. You have to know somebody who knows somebody. And there's so many opportunities, so much funding out here for that, right? So when we start with the prevention, we can help increase the resiliency, the protective factors, and reduce some of those other ones, right? We know that mentoring is an evidence-based model that happens, but for some reason, we know that one-to-one mentoring is more evidence-based than group mentoring, but we continue to set up group mentoring programs. Well, what's happening? The community can get involved with mentoring.
Mm-hmm.
Faith-based organizations, let's mentor without the requirement that they have to come to church or convert or be a part of that spiritual system.
Yeah.
Let's open our doors. There's plenty of apprenticeship programs that we can tap into. One of the challenges is this individualism. I want all the funding. I want to be able to do it all. I want to, instead of partnering and collaborating with, this is what you do, this is your expertise, this is what you specialize in. How about we all partner? Instead of me trying to get the $100,000, if I got the 40 and you do what you do and you're getting paid to do what you do, well, if you had a few slots open for me or for these youth or these adults that need to increase their protective factors, right? You have slots. You're getting paid. You need to fill your slots. Come on. We can bring the slots to you. It's called partnership, and we struggle with that.
We struggle
with partnership. We struggle with collaboration and coalitions because it's about me. It's about my agency, and we need this funding. And really, you don't need as much if you're doing it together, because if we really we took an asset map of all, if we did some asset mapping, which we've done plenty, but we don't put it into practice. Charlotte metro area is inundated with resources. Mm-hmm. They call it the great state of Mecklenburg because they have their own they have so many resources here, but we don't collaborate. It's the duplication of services. There's duplication of resources. Everyone's fighting. So what we talk about in our communities, crab mentality, right? Why? Because we've been taught that with division. We've been taught that. We've been born and raised in an individualistic society, and it's called internalized oppression. It's called part of the learned behavior, post-traumatic slave syndrome. All of these things impact us. And if we don't do that self-work to understand why, we keep talking about it. We're great at calling each other. Why are we the only group and the only race and only culture that has crabs in the barrel? But what are we doing about it? Is somebody taking accountability? I do. I put 30 years of self-work into this, of decolonizing my mind and studying these things and working on my past traumas and working on my implicit biases. When I do the implicit bias and it's a room full of Black and brown people, they have some of the strongest biases against ourselves. We do not love ourselves. And trying to explain what internalized oppression looks like is like, oh, well, they deserved it anyway. We think we don't want to be a part of that. When I come into a community, I want to come into the community that don't look like that, don't look like this, have the low crime, because we don't even value our own, right? We say buy back the block. Great concept. Where are we doing that? Yeah. You know, my agency, I purposely looked for an agency or a location to be on a bus line, to be in the hood. I wanted to be in a space where people have access to us. I chose to accept insurances and Medicaid so that the people who we're trying to reach have access to us. It's about personal goals. Mm-hmm. And I'm not money shaming, you know, do what you got to do. But when we're talking about the collective and what is our collective goals, that matter. What are we looking for? Are we truly trying to lift us and buy back that block? Are we trying to lift our value in our communities? Then we do have to have some compromise and sacrifice and talk to each other and collaborate and really work together. And that starts on the front end.
It all starts on the front end, right? I want to ask you this question along with this, but as we do, I want to say hello to Valerie, hello to Stephen, and hello to Darlene and to Roberta as they join in. So as we're looking at the role of the Black community, you mentioned early on education. And so from another aspect of education, I shared this in conversation last week. I believe Kelly was in that conversation. I think he's in all my conversations. But for us, since the impact of the criminal justice system is so ingrained in Black community, what are your thoughts of, and I know what mine are, I think reentry, incarceration, it needs to be a part of curriculum. We need to be able to start teaching from a young age. Look, Uncle Larry is not in college. Uncle Larry's locked up and going to be, and here's the reason why. We know that the cell is crime and safety, but we also know that that's a very small part of why it's real. It's more the economics is so ingrained, right? And so your thoughts on being able to start exposing um, how the criminal justice system affects the Black community, and being able to insert the education of as we raise our young men and women.
Absolutely. So we're talking about understanding the movies of 13th Amendment and understand slavery by another name. There's books, there's documentaries, there's ways to understand the Stanford experiment. They have a movie, they have the documentaries, and then they have a movie called The Experiment to really talk about how the criminal justice system was formed and what it was birthed out of. It was birthed out of a lot of those loitering laws that are still on the books and not all removed in most communities, where from seeing Blacks and whites speak or Blacks being on the street is when, or having those papers, even though they were not enslaved persons, and having their papers removed and brought back into the criminal industry, which created that system, right? And now, and we learn in the Stanford experiment that when you do put people in positions and that have these mental health, showing them war, showing them violence, showing them aggression, understanding oppression, depression, and all of these dynamics, they specifically scouted out these folks, right? Brought them in for experiments and did some mental and psychological training, and then put men in groups in power and control over each other. And so you criminalized a group of people just by an experiment, and watched it happen within 2 weeks. So now we're talking about years and years. And now we have what we call institutionalized. We're already talking about internalized depression and hurt and pain and low self-esteem, about feeling about our self-worth, walking as a second-class citizen. And what we know in mental health is what we think and believe impacts how we feel impacts how we do, behave, and take action. So we're internalized that we're second-class citizens, that our value doesn't matter anyway, that they're going to kill us anyway, that our property value doesn't look well, so we don't want to live in those communities, that if I do anything, if I go to the store, they're looking at me, if I do this, if I do that, and if I make money, I only make 17 cents on the dollar, and if I go to school, then I'm going to get labeled ADHD or ODD before I am with depression, or by, like, if I'm walking with all this internally for generations, and that I already know, where's my motivation? Right? I don't even have the motivation. So of course, and then what I love about when we do that work with the Monopoly game, right? If you just play the Monopoly game, and this is a great experiment everyone do, when you look at, yes, this was called the school to prison pipeline, absolutely, because everyone's diagnosed with ADHD, when oftentimes it's PTSD, it's usually trauma. It's usually trauma, absolutely, man.
It's trauma.
And they have the same symptoms, right? So we're not even, that's a whole nother thing, because you're gonna have me preaching tonight. But when we talk about the Monopoly board, when we train people in implicit bias and some of that, we have a group of people not start the game equally and equitably, right? So if you just wait 15 minutes before enter the game and you start to move around the board, there's an emotion that shows up. You don't even want to go around the board because all the properties bought, everything is, you're about to lose your money. You know damn well you're about to lose your money. So guess what? I'd rather go to jail because I don't have to pay no money. And I sit there and I wait and I'll pay the $50 and wait till my turn to get out because I'm just trying to get past go. It's such a real experience. It's just such a real, that it's not just a simulation. It's truly how we're operating when you operate out of an oppressive society. If you don't do that healing work to help retrain you and take your power back and understand that I do have power.
So we understand that, right? So now, as you mentioned, the Monopoly, not just an experiment, it's right. The reality in the game form, right? So poverty is a key determinant. And poverty has so many spokes, so many wheels, so many connected issues. One of the things we've been talking about the last couple of weeks, Isis, is that we talk about the cost of incarceration, but we don't talk about the cost of reentry. 75% of your minimum wage has to go to housing. So now I'm already behind on probation fees. And so you're ready to lock me up for being behind on child support, but I got to have a place to stay because I can't get into the Section 8 house. What that connection of poverty as far as the struggles in reentry. Can we touch on that?
Absolutely, because that's one of what we call the risk factors. So we got protective factors. Now we have risk factors, right? And if we know, so one of the risk factors, along with the risk factors, we know that studies show that over 90% of Black folks experience discrimination, racial discrimination almost daily. So we're talking about jobs. Now I gotta take this job, but man, I don't want to lower. So I already feel a type of way. Then I'm trying to take the job to make ends meet. But if I go and do this, I can make more money here, right? If I go and do this, I can do that because all I see in society is people with cars and paying this, right? We oftentimes, we want to judge and criticize those mamas that's willing to spend rent to get her baby those Jordans, right? But if we want to feel status, we're going to do what we got to do to help alleviate some of this internalized pressure that we feel and we don't realize what it is. Okay. So now we're going to go back to this poverty and trying to get out. A great book is by Elijah Anderson called Code of the Street. And it talks about that. And it talks about the underground movement and all of the things from underground mechanic and all these. We have to function. So you got the black market, which is huge, right? And then we're talking about the drug dealers. We're talking about all these people, but they have to operate to make income because poverty is a major risk factor. But we can't talk about poverty without the underlying factor that impacts that, which is racism, right? So now we have folk who are not making ends meet. So I'm going to do what I got to do. Yes, that puts my family at risk. But if again, I'm thinking about right now, behavioral, right? Instant gratification because I'm in survival mode. And when we're in survival mode, our brain are the parts of our brain, and I don't want to go into my trauma training, but those parts of the brain is in survival mode. So my logical thinking, my rational thinking, my emotional decision making and goal setting is tampered with, it's tainted. So I'm thinking of right now, survival mode says, this is what I got to do. So if I go drop this brick, I can get mama's food and I can pay the rent for this month. So I might flip it. I know, I'm good. I'm feeling good. I don't see nothing the next month because I'm still seeing outcomes just like anything else. I'm motivated. There's gratification coming out of it. So now as we're operating out of that, what happens? We got a system in place, right? I done broke the law. So now I'm in the criminal justice system. Guess what? If it's part of your norm and it's part of your family's dynamic, it's the norm. I just do this bit. I'll just go do this. I'm coming home, but I paid the rent. Yeah. That's what I know. I paid mama's rent. I know that I helped put my little sister in school so that she can get us up out of here, right? And so we're really operating. We're working to survive and to function. Does it make it right? No, but it took care of the outcome. I got an instant outcome from it right then and there. And so it's absolutely a major dynamic. It's all tied in, right? Again, so that education on the front end, our people aren't being trained about implicit bias up front. We aren't being trained about post-traumatic slave syndrome. We talk about it. We really, but to really put it into practice and integrate this way of life into our systems, we're not encouraging homeschooling. Right? We're not encouraging dismantling systems. It's very sensational because we're operating out of survival mode still in an oppressive society. So when we see these things, it's like, oh, that's impacting me. That could have been my son. That could have been this. Because you'll hear a lot of people say, I'm not impacted by that. I didn't live like that. I was a military child and I was this and I didn't experience racism because we don't know what racism is. We think racism is calling somebody the N-word.
Yeah. Or specifically having a cross burning in your yard. We don't look at how ingrained in everything we do and how we roll.
Absolutely. Yes, that is the part of the brain. I can use that in hippocampus and all those fancy words, Roberta. I'm one that I don't use those fancy words unless I call them the fancy language. I'm multilingual. I speak the language of the people.
Listen, Valerie, I'm appreciating all the things, your comments. You're coming in strong, and we're appreciating. Hi to Amari for jumping on and hanging out with us.
Yes, it's survival mode. It's been our norm.
It's been our norm, and because it's been our norm, right? It's a generational norm, and so we're teaching that, and we're now teaching under the guise of But in reality, when you peel back all the layers, that's what it is. And
That's what we are. We're layers. We're that onion.
so as we're talking about, and we talked about the school to prison pipeline a few months ago. A good friend from Philly was on, and she added that other piece, right? The school to prison to homeless pipeline. And so today I'm hanging out with some of my brothers and sisters who were in this abatement of the tent city, and hanging out with them, doing some supports. And so the brother and I are talking, and I'm with him concerning what he's trying to do now to find housing. In conversation, we talked about his connection and his history in the criminal justice system, and how intricate that was, and where he is right now. This connection, when we're looking at tackling the homeless situation, and we're looking at tackling the reentry situation, we're doing this apart, when in reality they're married. Do you talk about that for a few?
It is, but even homelessness itself is a very layered dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're talking about one, because now we're again systemically, we're talking about they're doing a credit check, they're doing a background check, and to get an apartment, there's certain things, right? And you need to have credit, and you have to have good credit to be able to get an apartment these days. So all those are factored in. I will say Charlotte has done a lot of work in this area, unlike some other metro areas, with the rapid rehousing and the coordinated assessment, trying to get people into homes much quicker, having funding set up for some of these homes, doing transition. So it is slower in the South. I'll say up north, we had a lot more transitional housing. Like, it was when I moved to the South and I was doing work in social work, I was like, okay, so I need a list of, and it was hard for people to tell me. And there's some that's very private. They don't last with funding. And I was just like, wait, where's the transitional housing here? It is very limited. So that is something that can also be developed, really has to be looked at here in this community, is those transitional housing. There's different individuals. I know different individual organizations are starting it. Rodney McGill has started getting homes and working with some of that stuff like there. So what we also don't really understand, again, because of the education, understanding the layers of homelessness, it's a mind state. And it's more than survival, because if you really did the work and look at the numbers, those that have done point to set and really got on the ground and talked to those that are living without a home, a lot of them they want to be there because they collect more money. The national average of the U.S. homeless average 60,000 versus other nations, and talking about those that are homeless and poverty. So it's different. There's a mind state that comes with that. Not all those that are living without a home or living outside on our streets want to be in a home. Absolutely. Not all of them want to be with their family. They enjoy not in the joy that because again, we misinterpret when we use some of these words, but there's some that do want to be there. And we're not taking that in account. Again, we're doing that savior and not really digging in to understand what has impacted them to want to be there. A lot of it is mental health, and not mental health, but poor mental health. A lot of it is they don't have the trust. They don't trust their family. They don't have a family. They feel grief and loss. And so they feel free being able to, because being there, they don't have to follow anyone's rules, anyone's policies, times. Like, I get to do what I want to do. I don't have a law. Like, so we're not digging into that and trying to understand their thinking. So one of the biggest mistakes we make when we're talking about organizations and work, we operate out of the savior. We don't actually get on the ground all the time and ask those that we're working to serve how they want to be served.
Yeah.
What is some of their best, like, what is going on in your mind? What do you perceive as your needs? We go by what we think we need, because I can't be without a home, and I can't be without core, and I can't be this way, and this is my body, this is what I'm feeling. And so my emotions and my sensation and all my things translate and get projected into how we create programs. And then I go and get funding to do the work for you, and you don't want it. So now I'm upset and I'm offended that you're not appreciating the work that I do.
And now I apply more labels to you because you didn't perform like I wanted you to perform and do what I wanted.
You didn't come back and fill out the paperwork. If you really wanted a house, you would have did it. Well, you didn't come and sign it, and you didn't come. because sometimes we don't, and they'll take it. Okay, well, that's what you know, whether it's the population that's being trafficked human, like we got all these homes and these resources for those babies that have been impacted by human trafficking. They come in, they eat, and they leave, and they go back, and we're like, what's wrong? They don't, I'm doing all because you haven't asked them what their needs were. You haven't looked at the trauma and the thought process and all the mental wellness that goes into disrupting that cycle of abuse or power and control. And so you really have to talk to them on the ground and really get some hard copy qualitative data to say, why are you here? How do we serve you? What is going on? What is it that you need? And a lot of them will tell you, I don't want to. And so we do the short-term fixes. We do the instant gratification things. We don't look at the long term. And some need the short term because they say, I just need to get back on my feet. That's why the transitional housing really helps, right? And when we're talking about those in reentry, I need that transition. Mm-hmm. Or maybe I really want to go back to that family that I would, but I can't. Or it's not that I don't have family support, but there's some long-term. A lot of these men that we don't ask have been sexually abused, but we ain't talking about that. Because if I talk about that, then you know. And so me going back to that home, it might have been my father, it might have been my aunt, it might have been my uncle. There's a lot of these things we're not, and mental wealth and mental health is not really factoring in. We want to address the quick material need, like we believe that behavioral change, but behavioral change is short term, and we're really not addressing the thing that got me there in the first place. And the top 3 gangs, like right when I did my work as a national gang specialist out in Chicago, we learned the top 3 were all sexually abused. Mm-hmm. We don't look at the things that cause some of these things that have us making these decisions, or our situations, or our crisis, or the things that we're going through that got us there. So these families coming home, some of them in jail because they were innocent, or because a lot of women are in jail because they were trying to defend themselves against their perpetrator. Mm-hmm. So now they have to readjust to the fact that they just spent this time for something like trying to survive, and their whole mind is like they're still grieving, they're still in the loss of their time. We're not addressing a lot of that stuff.
One of the things that you mentioned earlier, when you and I was chatting, getting ready to come on, was about the wraparound services and the fact that wraparound services it has to follow the individual, right? There was a brother that I worked with when I first came, started working at PRN, and brother had been 22 years experiencing homelessness. That was where he was. So many things was put in place for him. End of the story, he got a place, got in, and after 2 years, he was back out. He wasn't back out because he didn't have money, because he had income. He was back out because he made a decision that his social network was out there, his comfort level was out there, his survival skills, he understood how to thrive. And the reality is, the brother is around Charlotte. I still see him. He's got his signs up. He's not that. In reality, it's not money that he wants. This is just his flow. This is what he does. And he can't do that from there. And nobody took the time to ask him, what is it that you want? This is what I want for you.
And sometimes they don't even know because of that pain, that trauma, right? When I was at DJJ, oh my gosh, at Stonewall Jackson, so many young boys, when it was time for them to be released, they self-sabotage. They would try to run and then stay there and wait for the cops. Yeah. Because guess what? They got clothes, they got fed. They felt some sense of safety. Another young brother, I remember when he left, I was back on I said, what? He was at Miss Bay. It's more drugs and guns in my home than it is here. So I was like, oh, another young man. I remember he went and busted out the car windows and waited for the cops to come get him. Yeah. I'm just like, we got to talk about this stuff, right? And so absolutely what you said. And those wraparound services have to be real. First of all, reentry starts the first day that they enter the facility. We don't want to talk about that, right? Reentry starts the first day. Planning should start the first day. And when we're talking about a transition and post-release, that shouldn't be starting the last week trying to rush and get the discharge. That should be starting 90 days with all those wraparound services. Again, collaboration. That means Whether, like I was telling you, I was training and I did some training with another reentry program. Lawyers were going in, they partner with lawyers. They partner with mental health. They partner with case managers. We partner with all the resources, housing that they were going to need. And we started 90 days in. That was the way it was. You started 90 days doing the transition, doing the partnering, working with each other to transition this person out. So now you have built the rapport. So I'm probably more likely to come home and stay work with these services because now I have a rapport in the trust network. We know that it's about trust. But guess what? If I really didn't do that deeper level work and trauma and learning, because if I was abused as a child, if I was abandoned, if I was rejected, and I never did that healing work, it takes one thing to trigger me. One thing to trigger that my mother didn't care for me or my uncle. So what you gonna do for me?
Yeah.
I don't trust you. I don't get to people that close because every time they leave me or they drop me or right. So we're not doing that healing, taking our power back, changing our mind. Like you said, it was in them. So it takes more than just basic theory. It has to be a wraparound where this person has to really, and patience, because this don't happen overnight. We think that a person who was raised 15, 20, 30 years in this survival instinct mode is going to go and rehabilitate over 1 year, 2 years and come back and then come home and be ready their first 6 months to just hit the ground running. Where's the patience in that? Where's the understanding that this is long term? And I say healing is not a destination. It's a journey.
Absolutely.
This is long. This is not, when we talk about, I remember years ago, I'm not trying to talk about my age, but I remember TD Jakes did this special called, I called him Son. And he talked about the man sick of palsy. And he was saying that there was the men that had to carry him into the healing house. And he said, but we don't want to talk about the men. They had to be strong, or meaning the humans, right? Because they have to carry a human for hundreds of miles to get to this place, and then they couldn't get in because the roof was on fire. We'll tear it off. Roof could be your anger, but those men, those people had to carry somebody. It's heavy, and it's like, don't pick me up if you're going to drop me again. And we do that because we want to. Our hearts are good. We have the right intentions. We want to help, but when we realize how heavy it is, we're like, oh, yeah. Instead of being upfront, listen, this is my capacity, because half of the time we didn't do our own damn healing work. And half of us healers and helpers get into this field without doing our own work. So then we don't do our own self-care. We have agency burnout. And then we blame those we're serving for our damn burnout.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when something comes, it comes our way, we're not prepared because we haven't done the work. We've absorbed, but we've not done any building. And then there's another dynamic that you actually, but I want to say before I do this, hi to my friend Carolyn Gray. She's way down in New Bern, y'all, jumping in. My youngest queen, Kristen, is on also, Kristen Wells.
Kristen.
So that this piece of separation and building, right? So what happens is I go away, and so I'm away. And so this is the relationship, right, with family. And so when we come back together up here, I've had my 5-year experience. You had 5 years without me. Yeah, you called. We talked on the phone. We exchanged letters and pictures. You visited. But when you wasn't with me, I had to deal with what was happening behind those gates. You had to deal with what was happening in that household. And we don't take the time to get to know the new us. We're still here remembering who we used to be. And now we've separated and come back, and we've not taken the time. And that truly does affect what happens, because sometimes I just can't take it here, right? And you mentioned that I don't hate you. I just can't deal with this because you don't really know me anymore, and this has really changed.
That's grief work, and we're not doing that. It has to be grieved. Who I was, what I've known, me coming home to a new world. Like, things have changed since I've been gone. And the family, grieving who this person once was. But it's like all things, and that's serious work. We're not intentionally learning about the grief process, because that's a major loss and a major change. This experience changed me. It changed the way I think. It changed the way I behave. So I'm coming home with behaviors, and now the family's irritated. You in that jail shit. You in that, right? And so now there's a whole different level. So now we're talking about stressor in the home. stressor in my personal life, stressor in my career. I can't get my money right. Stressor in the fact that I'm walking with these 2-3 strikes against me and I'm always on edge. Stressor in the fact that I might just walk to the store and can get shot or killed because they thinking something. Stressor because people are judging me and they're looking at me and I'm walking with all my own shame and guilt and my hurt and my second class, right? Levels to this. Serious grief work.
And we're not addressing. So here we are, the community, and you've mentioned so much of this, Isis, and I appreciate it. This is really this really becomes a multi-layered conversation, right?
Serious.
And, so you got to come back. Are we focused on the
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Kelly. I got y'all.
Oh, before we do this one, I want to say hello. I just saw that Gail is on. Gail is coming from Philadelphia. Part of our North
house
up there, Philly in the house. And so thank you so much. Isis, are we focused on the right issues concerning reentry? We've got about 9 minutes. We're going to start putting the plane in the hangar. Are we focused on the right issues concerning reentry in the Black community?
We are, however, we're not collaborating on the right issues, right? Again, we're doing all of the individual. We're not really talking to each other. We're very disconnected, very individualistic practice. And so we have all the pieces out there. There's so many. We're also duplicating services. We're also vying for all these funds instead of collaborating, instead of talking. So I can use my agency as an example. I have a lot of staff, but I'm not going to specialize in everything, right? I refer out. I don't have to keep asking. I have a collective of those that I know are doing the work. Their ethics are right. And I'm calling them. I'm sending them over here. I'm sending them here. I'm sending them day therapy. They do it. I don't see them as competition. I see them as what we call extended family. They're extension of what we do. So when we change our minds about that, we do have it. But sometimes, again, that internalized oppression and that post-traumatic, it's impacting us all, even in how we organize, even in how we create our organizations. Is very individualistic centered. And so we don't have that village friend. We don't have who are we doing this with? And we have organizations that are partnering, but again, that there's still a different mindset about it. So we can have a coalition, but we're still all operating from how do I do this and how am I going to benefit? And we want that, right, for healthy businesses because that comes out of capitalism. But we're not talking about the barter. We're not talking about other systems that can really work. Again, if you're already getting funding for this and we know that you don't always fill your slots, I got people that I can send versus, well, I need another 30 grand to serve it. You really don't because you have those slots open. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So we do have a lot of focus on the right things, but it's so layered, right? Are we collaborating with those that, because everyone has a specialty, everyone has their lane. Are we partnering with those that have that? Are we being strategic on multidisciplinary teams, building rapport, building trust, going through those hard changes and understanding those that say, you know what, these are the ones that do this. Let me get a list of all of the ones that's doing that. That's asset mapping. We have it here. You all, what are your dynamics? What are the agents? Whatever. What are the resources? Okay, I'm sending them to you for that. Oh, you do this over here. And why are we all not promoting each other? Yeah. Right? You can go to our page. We're mental health, but you want to find about every other type of resource going on. We're not doing that enough. So we have the focus, but the focus has to be on collaboration, communicating. So I say the same thing in mental health, that we're not always communicating with the mental doctors, the health doctors, the other doctors, the understanding that the body is one system. We've segregated it and we're like torn it apart. So we're trying to, instead of having these, and they're starting, there's the integrative medicine. We're starting to see some of these do them with this effort, but we have to take our resources and really pull them together, and we can do so much more. And we have to believe it, because trying to get the community. So I use myself and understand it. So we're a for-profit agency, right? And we provide a lot of free and low-cost services. We constantly are promoting to the community to do fundraising, to give the community. It's a struggle. Mm-hmm. it's a struggle to get that to pull together. So when we're talking about the homelessness and reentry, we have agencies that's doing those services. We have partnerships, but oftentimes we go to the same ones. We're going to the same ones that kind of, we know they're usually getting money. We give money to the same ones in the society. We don't really give to the ones that's boots on the ground, that's really talking to the people. We always operate from top to bottom.
Yeah.
Top down approach, and it don't necessarily work.
And we're seeing that everywhere. Speaking of Gail being on, we have a initiative in Philadelphia where people at the table are not understanding that concept, and so monies keep filtering into people who have the larger entities, but actually don't have the cultural relationship and able to get in and be able to do boots on the ground work where the true work really is. I want to say hello to Shantia. I hope I pronounced that right. And Zari. Good to see you.
Another community partner. She specializes in seeing therapists. We're going to shout her out. She's a therapist that specializes in seeing therapists.
And you want to mess around, and I'm going to get you information. I'm going to have you on Wellness Chronicles when we're talking about trauma in our community real soon. You've answered.
Yes, we do trainings. We need
to be able to talk. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. I'm going to give you an opportunity to make sure we shout out everything that's going on with you, especially with Harmony Health. So you've mentioned this. Today's priority is, I don't want to read your mind, but I'm almost sure it's collaboration. But besides that,
who knew?
Right? That's the priority. The pieces are on the table. You know that, right? All the pieces are there.
It takes a village.
All the pieces are there. We gotta be able to.
But it's hard to do that. Who's shouting us out? How Harmony Health get up there? I'm not up there. Those people over there. It's hard to get to collaboration if we haven't done that self-work. If we really haven't done that internal healing and that really decolonize and coming and really retraining our mind out of survival and individualistic and dismantling that internalized oppression, it is really difficult to go to the next level in collaboration, because those are those triggers that show up and those trust issues. So it shows up. So it really starts with self-work. And it's a self thing, self-preservation. And it's hard to see past that, because this is my mission. And my feelings was hurt because somebody might have, said something about my mission or try to correct or give me feedback on my mission, because it's my mission, what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to do it my way to benefit the people. So the needs assessment that's the same thing with us. We want to do it our way. I want to give you a gift that I like. Yeah. But I don't take money I don't take time and get the expertise and the knowledge to understand what is it that Aaron likes. Let me sit back. Let me watch him. Let me observe him. Let me talk to his family and the experts of him. Or if I don't want him to know. But if it's not a surprise, I'm gonna come and ask you, tell me about Aaron.
Absolutely.
So that I can give you something that you like, that you need. But see, I go with what my feelings say, because I think this is cute. I like this and I want to give it to you. And then my feelings is hurt when you don't like it, or you re-gift it, or you give it away, or you so-called waste it, because it was about me.
Mm-hmm.
That's the difference. And the way we collaborate, it has to still operate from a different mind state. So we haven't decolonized that and changed and really changed our mind to a collective and in a communal, right, culture. And that's hard to do when we don't live in a communal culture. It is really swimming upstream, right? The last thing I drop is like, we always want to focus on the problems. For every problem, there's a benefit to it. And so and that's what the oppression does. We tell you to focus on a problem that we never get to solutions.
And we're always looking at the risk. We're always looking at the risk, and the risk. We're taught the risks are always overwhelming and stop us from going next level.
Because we believe it. So then we think it. We focus on a problem. We focus on a dead fish. We don't ever get to the water.
Yeah. Isis, thank you so very much. Listen,
thank you.
If you would tell us about Harmony Health again, and anything that you want to. You got 2 minutes. Go ahead and give it to us.
Harmony Health. Let's see. I let the people talk about it. I'm honest about it. I let the people talk about it. We the village. We are called the community's home for healing. We collaborate. We bring in partners. We have so many community events going on that again is not me. It's not what I do. It's about them. They coming in and showcasing their other businesses. I don't get paid off it. I don't benefit. I just partner with them, allow them to show what the community has to offer so that we have wraparound. So we focus on mental health. That's what we do, right? We have others that come with concealed carry, financial information, anything that's going to benefit the community resources. We do trainings. We find ways to do discounted stuff. We provide low and free costs if we have availability. If we don't, we don't. We're honest. We don't have any more scholarships. If the community supports us and giving us money to do that, then we give it back out to the community. We're here. You can find us on Facebook, on the internet. We're here. We're open. We're hiring because we continue to grow, and we focus on the trauma. That's our specialty, is that the trauma work and helping people to resolve it. If you're committed, we're committed, because we can teach all we want. It's up to you to learn. We can help guide you through the healing process. It's your job to do the healing work.
Thank you so very much for your time. Thank you for everything that you are doing in community and for the lives of others. I appreciate you. I hope you fell for the bait and that I get you back here.
Oh, wait, but we got to shout out our nonprofit, Drums for Life, because we're over there at Promise Resource Network. We've been providing
every second Saturday.
We use holistic healing in the community as well. So we've done that. We provided free instruments through Drums for Life. Drums for Life is our partners, our family organization. That is our family. And they've also provided free garden beds to the community. So we do a lot of community work. We're not just a
second Saturday. Drums for Life on the Facebook page. Every second.
We was in the family already. Just want to say that.
You got that. Listen, if you're on right now, number one, please share this conversation on your social media platforms. I want to say hi to my friend Robin Hightower, who's on also from Philadelphia, Philly House. I also would like to tell you this, and it's very important, right? If you could, I am aggressively trying to get us 10,000 subscriptions to our YouTube page, our YouTube channel for Promise Resource Network.
You just made 1,000. Can you help us out?
Yeah. So if you
could, we just got to 1,000. Share the love.
Share the love. Listen, as a matter of fact, when you come in with us, you go in over there. Let's get that done. Just go in and subscribe and tell your people to subscribe. I really want to begin April making sure that people are getting this wellness and recovery. Isis, one more time, thank you so very much. We appreciate you. Everybody that came on, make sure you share. Thank you for your comments. We love you. We'll see you.
Thank you, Kristen and Kelly. Again, I'm going to thank you personally because now he wants me on weekly without the panel. Thank you, Kristen and Kelly. I'm coming to talk to you privately. Love y'all.
Hey, listen, those are my booking agents. Hey, we will see you next week, 6 o'clock Wellness Chronicles. Next week, we begin a series for the month of March. We're talking about healthcare in the Black community. You don't want to miss those Mondays because we're talking about all things healthcare. All right. Listen, and Valerie,
yes,
with me.
Definitely. Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. March is Social Work Appreciation Month. Just saying.
We got a lot to talk about. So I'll be seeing you next month, Queen.
Thank you. TDV Violence. We definitely. Come on now.
There you go.
Yes. We just talked about, so Valerie, follow our page. We just talked about that and knowing with some data and what teen dating violence is. Follow us, Harmony Health Therapeutic Services. Harmony Health, Promise Resource Network. Follow those pages, subscribe to those YouTubes, collaboration partnership. We love you. Have an absolutely magnificent week. Keep our folks in prayer who are in transition, no matter what that transition is. We love you. Peace and blessings.